The youngest recruit in the academy, and the universe's apex predator swore to protect her. First Document Captain Zara Chen stood barely 5 feet tall in her crisp academy uniform, her dark hair pulled back in regulation braids that made her look even younger than her 16 years. The other cadets towered over her as they filed into the massive amphitheater of the Galactic Defense Academy, their conversations a mix of excited chatter and nervous whispers. Most were between 18 and 22, the standard age range for new recruits. Zara was an exception that nobody quite understood. The academy itself was a marvel of engineering, built into the hollow core of an asteroid that had been converted into humanity's premier military training facility. Artificial gravity generators created a comfortable environment, while massive viewports showed the star-filled void beyond. It was here that the best and brightest from across human space came to learn how to defend their species against the countless threats that lurked in the galaxy. As Zara found her assigned seat in the front row, she could feel hundreds of eyes on her. Whispers followed in her wake. Some questioned how someone so young had passed the rigorous entrance exams. Others wondered if she was some kind of political appointment, the daughter of an admiral or politician who had pulled strings to get her here. The truth was far more complicated and far more impressive than any of them could imagine. 3 years ago, Zara had been a 13-year-old prodigy living on the agricultural world of New Eden. Her parents were simple farmers who had no idea their daughter possessed one of the most brilliant tactical minds in human history. While other children played games, Zara consumed military history texts and strategy manuals. She built complex simulations in her bedroom, computer and solved theoretical battle scenarios that stumped seasoned officers. Her talent was discovered during a routine aptitude test that all colonial children took at age 13. The results were so extraordinary that they were flagged all the way up to Galactic Defense Command. Within a month, military psychologists and strategists were on New Eden, administering test after test. Zara solved every puzzle they gave her, anticipated enemy movements in simulated battles, and demonstrated an intuitive understanding of three-dimensional warfare that took most officers decades to develop. The Academy had never accepted anyone under 18, but Zara's scores broke every record they had. After months of debate, the Academy Board made an unprecedented decision. They would accept her on a trial basis, with additional support and monitoring to ensure her emotional and social development wasn't damaged by the intense military environment. Now, as she sat in that amphitheater surrounded by young adults who looked at her like she was a child playing dress-up, Zara wondered if she had made a mistake. The academic work would be easy enough, but fitting in with her fellow cadets seemed impossible. She was already the smallest person in the room, and her age made her even more of an outsider. The massive doors at the rear of the amphitheater slid open with a pneumatic hiss, and the chatter died instantly. Admiral Sarah Reeves strode into the room, her presence commanding immediate attention. She was a legend in the fleet, a woman who had fought in 3 major conflicts and earned more decorations than most officers saw in their entire careers. Her steel-gray hair was cut short, and her weathered face bore the scars of someone who had seen real combat. Behind her walked the Academy's senior staff, a collection of the finest military minds humanity had produced. But it was the figure bringing up the rear that caused every cadet in the room to sit up straighter. Even Zara, who had studied every major military figure in human history, felt her breath catch. General Marcus Kane was a living legend, though few people knew the full extent of his story. Officially, he was listed as a Special Operations Commander who had served with distinction in the Centauri conflict 20 years ago. Unofficially, he was something far more dangerous. Kane was one of the enhanced soldiers from the classified Titan project, genetically modified and cybernetically augmented humans designed to be the ultimate warriors. The Titan project had been humanity's response to first contact with hostile alien species. When diplomatic channels failed and humanity faced extinction, desperate scientists had pushed the boundaries of human enhancement far beyond anything previously attempted. They created soldiers who were faster, stronger, and more resilient than baseline humans. But more importantly, they possessed an enhanced combat instinct that bordered on supernatural. Kane stood 6.5 feet tall, his muscular frame filling out his uniform in a way that suggested barely contained power. His dark hair was streaked with silver, and his green eyes seemed to catalog every person in the room with military precision. Scars crisscrossed his hands and neck, visible reminders of battles fought in the dark corners of space where regular soldiers couldn't survive. As Admiral Reeves began her welcoming address, explaining the Academy's mission and the challenges that lay ahead, Kane's gaze swept across the assembled cadets. His enhanced senses took in details that others would miss. Elevated heart rates indicating nervousness, micro-expressions revealing character traits, and the general physical conditioning of each recruit. When his eyes found Zara in the front row, something unexpected happened. For just a moment, his expression softened. She was so small, so young, surrounded by cadets who looked like giants beside her, but there was something in her posture, in the way she held herself, that spoke of an inner strength that went far beyond her physical size. Kane had read her file, of course. Every instructor had been briefed on the Academy's youngest recruit. Her test scores were genuinely remarkable, showing strategic thinking capabilities that rivaled the greatest military minds in human history. But seeing her now, looking so vulnerable among the older cadets, Kane felt something stir in his chest that he hadn't experienced in years. It was a protective instinct, amplified by his enhanced genetics but rooted in something deeper. This girl represented something precious, raw potential that could change the course of human military doctrine, if properly nurtured and protected. In a galaxy full of threats that wanted nothing more than to destroy humanity, Zara Chen might be one of their greatest assets. As Admiral Reeves concluded her speech and the cadets began to file out for their first training sessions, Kane made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He would watch over Zara Chen, not just as an instructor but as a guardian. The universe's apex predator had found someone worth protecting. Neither of them knew that this moment would set in motion events that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy and test the bonds between them in ways they could never imagine. The youngest recruit in the Academy, and the universe's apex predator, swore to protect her second document. The Academy's training facility stretched across 3 levels of the asteroid's interior, containing everything from traditional gymnasiums to advanced holographic combat simulators. Zara found herself assigned to Training Group Delta, along with 23 other first-year cadets. As they assembled in the main gymnasium, she noticed that several of her fellow recruits kept glancing at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright skepticism. "Attention, cadets." The voice that cut through the air belonged to Sergeant Major Torres, a compact woman with graying hair and the kind of presence that made even the largest recruit stand straighter. "For the next 6 months, you will learn the fundamentals of military discipline, physical conditioning, and basic combat techniques. Some of you think you're hot stuff because you dominated your home planet's youth leagues or local militias. Forget everything you think you know." Zara positioned herself at the back of the formation, hoping to blend in despite her obvious physical disadvantages. The cadet next to her was David Morrison, a 20-year-old from the mining colonies who stood nearly 2 feet taller than her. His arms were thick with muscle earned from years of heavy labor, and he looked down at her with barely concealed disdain. "What's a kid doing here?" he muttered to his friend. "This is supposed to be an elite military academy, not a daycare center." Before Zara could respond, Torres was in front of them, her sharp eyes fixed on Morrison. "Did you have something to say, Cadet Morrison?" Morrison's face flushed red, but he straightened his shoulders defiantly. "I was just wondering how someone that young passed the entrance requirements." "Sergeant Major." Torres studied him for a long moment, then shifted her gaze to Zara. "Cadet Chen, step forward." Zara's heart pounded as she moved to stand beside the instructor. Every eye in the formation was now focused on her, and she could feel the weight of their judgment. Torres walked around her slowly, like a predator circling prey. "Cadet Chen is indeed our youngest recruit," Torres announced. "She's also scored higher on tactical assessment tests than any cadet in Academy history. Her strategic simulations have been studied by senior command staff, and her solutions to complex battlefield scenarios have been incorporated into our advanced curriculum." She stopped directly in front of Morrison. "The question isn't whether she belongs here, Cadet Morrison. The question is whether you're smart enough to learn from her." The gymnasium fell silent except for the hum of the air recycling systems. Morrison's face had gone from red to pale, and several other cadets were looking at Zara with new interest rather than dismissal. "Now," Torres continued, We're going to start with basic hand-to-hand combat techniques. Pair off for sparring exercises. Cadet Chen, you're with Morrison. Zara's stomach dropped. Morrison outweighed her by at least 80 pounds and had reach advantages that would make any physical confrontation laughably one-sided. She saw the predatory smile that crossed his face and knew he was looking forward to humiliating her in front of the entire group. What none of them noticed was General Kane, entering the gymnasium through a side door. He had finished his administrative duties early and decided to observe the first training session for the new cadets. His enhanced hearing had caught Torres's exchange with Morrison, and his protective instincts regarding Zara were already on high alert. Kane positioned himself where he could watch the sparring matches without being obvious about it. His augmented vision allowed him to analyze combat situations with computer-like precision, and he could see that Torres had deliberately paired the smallest cadet with one of the largest and most aggressive. It was either a terrible mistake or a calculated test. As the pairs spread out across the gymnasium floor, Morrison cracked his knuckles and grinned at Zara. "Don't worry, kid. I'll go easy on you. Wouldn't want to break the Academy's special project." Zara said nothing, instead settling into a combat stance she had learned from training videos and martial arts manuals. Her small size meant she would have to rely on speed, technique, and intelligence rather than raw strength. Morrison assumed a sloppy fighting position, clearly not taking her seriously. Torres called for the sparring to begin, and Morrison immediately lunged forward, trying to grapple Zara and use his size advantage to pin her. But Zara wasn't where he expected her to be. She had slipped to the side with fluid grace, and Morrison found himself stumbling past her, off balance and confused. "Stand still," he growled, turning to face her again. This time he threw a clumsy punch that would have been devastating if it had connected. Instead, Zara ducked under his arm and drove her elbow into his solar plexus with precision that spoke of serious study and practice. Morrison doubled over, gasping for air, and Zara swept his legs out from under him. He crashed to the gymnasium floor with a sound that echoed across the room. Other sparring matches paused as cadets turned to stare at the impossible sight of the smallest recruit standing over one of the largest. Kane watched with growing appreciation. Zara's movements were textbook perfect, demonstrating techniques that most cadets took months to master. She had clearly spent years preparing for this moment, compensating for her physical limitations with superior training and tactical thinking. Morrison climbed to his feet, his face now red with embarrassment and anger. "Lucky shot," he snarled, and this time he came at her with serious intent to hurt. His fist whistled through the air where her head had been a split second before, and his follow-up kick would have broken ribs if it had connected. But Zara was already moving, flowing around his attacks like water around stone. She trapped his extended arm, used his own momentum against him, and sent him crashing to the floor again with a perfectly executed throw that would have impressed martial arts masters. The gymnasium had gone completely quiet. Even Torres was watching with obvious surprise and approval. Morrison lay on his back, staring up at the ceiling and trying to figure out what had just happened to him. Kane felt a surge of pride and something else, validation of his protective instincts. This girl was indeed something special, but she was also going to need protection from more than just hostile aliens. The resentment and jealousy of her fellow cadets could be just as dangerous in its own way. As Torres called an end to the sparring session, and Morrison limped away with his wounded pride, several other cadets approached Zara with new respect. But Kane also noticed the darker looks from some corners of the room, cadets who saw her success as a threat to their own standing. "Impressive technique, Cadet Chen," Torres said as the group prepared to move to their next training station. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" "Books and videos mostly, Sergeant Major," Zara replied honestly. "And a lot of practice in my parents' barn." Torres nodded slowly. "Natural talent combined with serious dedication. That's a rare combination." She paused, studying Zara carefully. "But remember, cadet, being the best at something can make you as many enemies as friends. Watch your back." As the group filed out of the gymnasium, Kane lingered behind, his mind already working on plans to ensure Zara's safety. The girl had just painted a target on herself by demonstrating her capabilities so dramatically. In a competitive environment like the Academy, that could lead to serious problems. But Kane had faced down alien war fleets and survived battles that would have destroyed entire armies. A few jealous cadets were hardly going to present an insurmountable challenge. He would watch over Zara Chen, and anyone who tried to harm her would discover exactly why the enhanced soldiers of the Titan Project were considered humanity's ultimate weapons. The universe's apex predator had made his choice, and he would stand by it no matter what came next. The youngest recruit in the academy, and the universe's apex predator swore to protect her third document. The academy's mess hall buzzed with the conversations of 600 cadets from across human space, their voices creating a constant hum that echoed off the polished metal walls. Zara sat alone at a corner table, picking at her regulation meal while trying to ignore the stares and whispers that seemed to follow her everywhere. 3 weeks had passed since her sparring match with Morrison, and the incident had only increased the attention focused on her. Some cadets approached her with genuine respect, asking about her training methods and tactical insights. Others kept their distance, clearly uncomfortable with someone so young being among their ranks. But a third group had emerged that concerned her most, those who saw her presence as an insult to their own achievements, and were looking for ways to put her in what they considered her proper place. Morrison himself had become the leader of this faction. His public humiliation at the hands of a 16-year-old girl had festered into genuine resentment, and he had begun gathering like-minded cadets around him. They didn't dare challenge her directly after Torres's warning about harassment, but Zara could feel their hostility like a physical weight. "Mind if I sit here?" The voice was warm and friendly, belonging to Elena Vasquez, a cadet from the Luna colonies who had been one of the first to approach Zara with genuine friendship rather than curiosity. Elena was 21, with short auburn hair and the kind of easy confidence that came from growing up in the low-gravity environments of the moon. "Please," Zara said gratefully. Elena was one of the few people in the academy who treated her like a normal person, rather than either a curiosity or a threat. As Elena settled into the chair across from her, she glanced around the mess hall with a concerned expression. "You know Morrison's been talking to people, right? He's got about a dozen cadets convinced that your presence here is some kind of political stunt that undermines their achievements." Zara nodded sadly. "I figured as much. The way some of them look at me." She trailed off, not wanting to voice her fears. "Hey," Elena said firmly, "you earned your place here fair and square. Better than fair, actually. I've seen your test scores, and they're legitimately incredible. Don't let a bunch of insecure bullies make you doubt yourself." Before Zara could respond, the mess hall's main doors opened to admit General Kane. The conversations didn't stop, but they definitely quieted as the imposing figure made his way through the room. Kane rarely ate with the cadets, preferring to take his meals in the officers' quarters, so his presence was noteworthy. What most of the cadets didn't realize was that Kane had been making these appearances specifically to keep an eye on Zara. His enhanced senses allowed him to monitor situations from across the room, and he had been tracking the growing tension around the youngest recruit with increasing concern. Kane selected a meal from the serving line and deliberately chose a table with a clear line of sight to Zara's corner. To casual observation, he appeared to be reading reports on his tablet while eating, but his attention was actually focused on the subtle dynamics playing out around the mess hall. Morrison sat with his growing circle of supporters 3 tables away from Zara, and Kane could hear every word of their conversation thanks to his augmented hearing. They were discussing plans for something they called an educational experience for the Academy's special recruit. The details were vague, but the intent was clearly hostile. As Kane listened, his jaw tightened with barely controlled anger. These cadets had no idea what they were dealing with when it came to either Zara or himself. The girl represented humanity's future strategic capabilities, and he would not allow petty jealousy to interfere with her development. His contemplation was interrupted by movement at Morrison's table. The large cadet had stood up and was walking directly toward Zara's corner, his supporters following behind like a pack of predators. Other cadets in the mess hall sensed the approaching confrontation, and conversations began to die away. "Well, if it isn't the Academy's special princess," Morrison said loudly enough for half the mess hall to hear. "Enjoying your royal treatment, Chen?" Zara looked up from her meal, her expression carefully neutral despite the fear that was obvious to Kane's enhanced perception. "I don't know what you're talking about, Morrison." Morrison leaned down, placing his hands on the table in a clear attempt to intimidate her with his size. Come off it. We all know you're here because someone pulled strings. No way a little kid legitimately qualifies for this program. Elena started to stand, clearly ready to defend her friend, but Zara caught her arm. It's okay, she said quietly, though Kane could hear the tremor in her voice. Is it okay? Morrison pressed. Because I think you're taking a spot that should have gone to someone who actually deserves it. Someone who can handle the physical demands of real military service. The mess hall had gone almost completely silent now, with hundreds of cadets watching the confrontation unfold. Kane slowly set down his tablet and stood, his movement deliberate and unmistakable. The sight of the legendary general rising from his seat caused a ripple of nervous energy through the room. But before Kane could intervene, Zara surprised everyone by standing up herself. Despite barely reaching Morrison's chest, she looked him directly in the eye with a calm confidence that seemed to radiate outward. You want to know if I deserve to be here? She said, her voice carrying clearly in the silent hall. Fine. Name any military engagement from the last 50 years. Any battle, any campaign, any strategic situation. I'll analyze it for you right now in front of everyone and explain what went wrong and how it could have been done better. Morrison blinked, clearly caught off guard by her response. What does that prove? Anyone can memorize history books. Pick something recent then, Zara challenged. The Kepler Station incident last month. The pirates who took hostages and held off an entire fleet for 6 hours before being eliminated. What would you have done differently? Morrison's face flushed as he realized he had no idea what she was talking about. The Kepler incident had been classified, known only to senior command staff and those with high-level security clearances. The fact that Zara not only knew about it but was offering to analyze it publicly demonstrated a level of access and capability that went far beyond what any normal cadet would possess. Kane allowed himself a small smile. The girl was handling this better than he had expected, using her intellectual advantages to turn the confrontation to her favor. But he remained ready to intervene if the situation escalated beyond words. That's classified information, one of Morrison's supporters said uncertainly. Is it? Zara asked innocently. My mistake. How about the theoretical scenario from last week's advanced strategy class? The one where Admiral Reeves asked the senior cadets to plan a defense of the Centauri colonies against a numerically superior force. Several senior cadets in the mess hall perked up with interest. That scenario had been considered virtually impossible to solve satisfactorily, and most of them had struggled with it for hours without finding a workable solution. I solved it in 12 minutes, Zara continued. Would you like me to walk through my analysis? Or perhaps you'd prefer to share your own solution with everyone? Morrison's face had gone from red to pale as he realized he was being intellectually outmaneuvered by someone half his age. His supporters were looking increasingly uncomfortable as other cadets began to murmur with interest about Zara's claimed solution. This is stupid, Morrison finally said, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. Book learning doesn't make someone a soldier. You're absolutely right, Zara agreed, which is why I'm here to learn the things that books can't teach. Just like you are. The only difference is that I'm starting with different strengths and weaknesses than you have. The simple honesty of her response seemed to deflate the confrontation entirely. Morrison stood there for a moment longer, clearly struggling to find a way to regain the initiative, but the moment had passed. The crowd of watching cadets was no longer hostile toward Zara. They were curious about her claimed solution to the impossible scenario. As Morrison and his supporters retreated to their table with wounded pride, Kane settled back into his chair with satisfaction. Zara had handled the situation perfectly, using her intelligence to defuse a potentially dangerous confrontation without making unnecessary enemies. She was learning to navigate the social dynamics of the academy just as skillfully as she mastered tactical problems. But Kane also knew that this victory would only increase Morrison's resentment. The bully had been publicly embarrassed for the second time, and people like him rarely responded to such humiliation with graceful acceptance. Kane would need to keep an even closer watch in the days to come. The universe's apex predator had found someone worth protecting, and he was beginning to understand that the threats to her might be more subtle and complex than anything he had faced in open combat. The youngest recruit in the academy, and the universe's apex predator swore to protect her fourth document. The academy's night cycle brought artificial darkness to simulate normal circadian rhythms, though the gentle hum of life support systems never ceased. Zara made her way through the dimly lit corridors toward the advanced simulation laboratory, her tablet containing files she had been reviewing for tomorrow's tactical exercise. At this hour, most cadets were either sleeping or socializing in the common areas, leaving the academic sections of the academy largely empty. She had been working late in the library, poring over historical battle data and strategic analyses that most cadets wouldn't encounter until their third year. The material fascinated her, each campaign and engagement revealing new patterns and possibilities that she could apply to theoretical scenarios. Time had slipped away from her, and now she found herself walking alone through corridors that felt far too quiet. The simulation laboratory was housed in one of the Academy's most secure sections, containing quantum computers capable of modeling entire star systems in real time. Zara had special access privileges that allowed her to use the advanced systems for her research, another sign of how exceptional her situation truly was. As she approached the laboratory entrance, her keycard ready, she heard footsteps echoing behind her. Turning around, she saw Morrison and 4 of his supporters emerging from a side corridor. They had clearly been waiting for her, and the predatory looks on their faces made her stomach clench with fear. In the bright lights of the mess hall, with hundreds of witnesses, Morrison had been forced to rely on words and posturing. Here in the empty corridors, the rules were different. Well, Morrison said, his voice carrying an ugly edge. The little genius is out past her bedtime. Where are your bodyguards, Princess? Zara forced herself to remain calm, though her heart was racing. I don't have bodyguards, I was just heading back to my quarters. Through the simulation lab, Morrison's companion, a cadet named Peters from the asteroid mining colonies, stepped forward with a cruel smile. That's not the way to the dormitories, little girl. Zara realized with growing panic that they had planned this encounter carefully. They knew her routines and had positioned themselves to cut off her most direct route back to safety. The corridor stretched empty in both directions, with no sign of the security patrols that regularly monitored the academy. Look, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I don't want any trouble. I'll just take a different route back to my room. Morrison stepped directly in front of her, using his size to block her path. Oh, but we want to have a conversation with you, Chen. See, some of us think you need to learn your place around here. What they didn't know was that General Kane had been monitoring Zara's location through the Academy's security network. His enhanced awareness and protective instincts had led him to develop an informal system of tracking her movements, especially during vulnerable times like the night shift. When he saw that she was alone in a section of the Academy where Morrison's group had also been detected, his combat reflexes immediately activated. Kane moved through the corridors with the silent efficiency of a predator, his enhanced physiology allowing him to cover ground faster than any baseline human while making almost no sound. His augmented senses picked up the voices ahead long before a normal person would have heard anything, and what he heard made his enhanced combat systems begin flooding his bloodstream with combat stimulants. Maybe we should teach the little princess what happens to people who think they're better than everyone else, Peters was saying, his meaning unmistakably threatening. Kane rounded the corner to see Zara backed against the laboratory door, surrounded by 5 much larger cadets who were clearly working up the courage to cross a line from harassment to actual violence. The sight triggered something deep and primal in his enhanced nervous system, not just protective instinct, but the calculated rage of humanity's apex predator confronting a threat to something precious. Cadets! Kane's voice cut through the corridor like a blade, causing all 5 young men to freeze in place. His tone was perfectly calm and controlled, which somehow made it far more terrifying than if he had been shouting. I believe you're all supposed to be in your quarters at this hour. Morrison turned around, his face cycling through expressions of surprise, fear, and desperate bravado. General Kane, sir. We were just having a conversation with Cadet Chen about her studies. Kane walked forward with measured steps, his enhanced senses reading their body language, heart rates, and stress indicators with computer-like precision. Morrison was lying. Peters was on the verge of panic, and the other 3 were looking for escape routes. More importantly, Zara was terrified, but unharmed. A conversation, Kane repeated, his green eyes fixing on Morrison with the kind of attention that made hardened soldiers uncomfortable. "How thoughtful of you to take such an interest in your fellow cadets' academic progress." The irony in his voice was razor sharp, and Morrison flinched as if he had been struck. Kane continued his approach until he was close enough that Morrison had to crane his neck upward to maintain eye contact. The difference in their physical presence was overwhelming. Morrison was large for a baseline human, but Kane was something else entirely. "However," Kane continued in that same dangerously calm tone, "I notice that Cadet Chen appears distressed by your conversation. Perhaps you could explain why that might be." Morrison opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Kane's presence up close was unlike anything the young man had ever experienced. It wasn't just his size or obvious physical capabilities. There was something predatory about him that triggered every survival instinct Morrison possessed. "I thought not," Kane said softly. He turned his attention to Zara, and his expression softened noticeably. "Cadet Chen, are you injured?" "No, sir," Zara managed to say, though her voice was shaky with residual fear. "They didn't touch me." Kane nodded, but his enhanced hearing detected the stress in her voice, and his protective rage intensified accordingly. He turned back to Morrison and his companions, and when he spoke again, there was something in his tone that made them all take an involuntary step backward. "Cadets Morrison, Peters, Williams, Drake, and Foster," he said, somehow making their names sound like threats. "You will return to your quarters immediately. You will not speak to, approach, or interact with Cadet Chen in any way that could be construed as intimidating or threatening. You will treat her with the same respect and courtesy you would show any other member of this academy." Morrison found his voice, though it came out as little more than a whisper. "Yes, sir." "Furthermore," Kane continued, "you will remember that this academy has extensive surveillance systems, and that I take a personal interest in the welfare of all cadets under my supervision. Should any of you forget these simple guidelines, you will discover that there are many unpleasant training exercises that can be assigned to cadets who require additional education in proper conduct." The threat was politely worded but unmistakable in its implications. Morrison and his friends nodded frantically and began backing away down the corridor, their earlier bravado completely evaporated. "Oh, and cadets?" Kane called after them. They stopped and turned back nervously. "Sleep well?" The dismissal was delivered with a slight smile that didn't reach Kane's eyes, and the 5 young men practically ran back toward their quarters. Kane watched them go until they disappeared around a distant corner, then turned his full attention to Zara. "Are you certain you're unharmed?" he asked, his voice now gentle and concerned. "They didn't lay hands on you?" Zara shook her head, then looked up at him with an expression of confusion and gratitude. "Thank you, sir. How did you know where to find me?" Kane studied her for a moment, weighing how much he should reveal about his protective surveillance. "I make it my business to be aware of potential problems in the academy, Cadet Chen, and I'm afraid you represent a rather obvious target for certain types of individuals." "Because I'm young," Zara said with resignation. "Because you're exceptional," Kane corrected firmly. "Some people respond to excellence with admiration and a desire to improve themselves. Others respond with resentment and a desire to tear down what they can't achieve. Tonight you encountered the second type." Zara nodded slowly, processing his words. "Will this happen again?" Kane's expression hardened slightly. "Not if I can prevent it." "But Zara." He paused, realizing he had used her first name instead of her rank. "Cadet Chen, you need to be more careful about your movements around the academy, especially during night hours. Stay in groups when possible, and avoid isolated areas." "I will, sir," she promised. "And General Kane, thank you for protecting me." Kane felt something shift in his chest at her words, a recognition and acceptance of the role he had chosen to play in her life. The universe's apex predator had officially become a guardian, and he found that the role suited him far better than he had expected. As he escorted her safely back to the dormitory section, Kane was already planning enhanced security measures and considering which of his fellow instructors could be trusted to help watch over humanity's most promising young strategist. might be humanity's most valuable military asset. The youngest recruit in the Academy, and the universe's apex predator swore to protect her fifth document, the Academy's Strategic Command Center was a marvel of military engineering, its walls lined with holographic displays showing real-time data from across human space. Here, senior cadets learned to coordinate fleet movements, analyze intelligence reports, and make the kind of decisions that could determine the fate of entire star systems. It was normally restricted to fourth-year cadets, but exceptions had been made for Zara's advanced placement in several courses. 6 months had passed since the corridor incident, and the dynamics of the Academy had shifted significantly. Morrison and his followers had been reassigned to different training groups and subjected to additional disciplinary measures that made their lives considerably more difficult. More importantly, word of Kane's protection had spread through the cadet population, creating an invisible barrier around Zara that few dared to cross. She sat now at one of the command center's primary stations, working through a simulation that challenged her to coordinate the defense of 3 star systems against a coordinated alien assault. The scenario was based on classified intelligence about potential enemy capabilities, making it both educational and strategically relevant. Around her, a dozen senior cadets struggled with supporting roles in the same exercise. Admiral Reeves stood behind Zara's station, watching the young genius work with undisguised fascination. Zara's hands moved across the holographic interface with fluid precision, deploying fleet elements and coordinating defensive strategies with an intuitive understanding that took most officers decades to develop. Her solutions were elegant and efficient, maximizing defensive capabilities while minimizing casualties and resource expenditure. "Interesting approach, Cadet Chen," Admiral Reeves observed as Zara redirected a battle group to create a tactical pincer movement. Most commanders would have tried to meet the enemy assault head-on. Zara glanced up briefly from her displays. "Direct confrontation plays to their numerical advantage, Admiral. By using the asteroid fields and gas giants as force multipliers, we can create favorable engagement conditions that negate their superior numbers." As she spoke, the simulation updated to show the results of her tactical decisions. The alien fleet found itself divided and confused, facing coordinated attacks from unexpected directions, while their superior firepower was neutralized by terrain advantages. What should have been an overwhelming victory for the invaders became a strategic defeat that left them vulnerable to counterattack. Kane entered the command center as the exercise was concluding, his presence immediately noticed by everyone in the room. He had been monitoring Zara's progress through the Academy's network, watching her excel in every subject while navigating the complex social dynamics of military life with increasing confidence. "Impressive work, everyone," Admiral Reeves announced as the simulation ended. "Cadet Chen, your coordination of the defensive strategy was particularly noteworthy. The enemy casualties were minimal while their strategic objectives were completely denied." Kane approached Zara's station as the other cadets began filing out for their next classes. He had developed a habit of checking in with her after major exercises, partly to assess her emotional state, and partly because he found her tactical insights genuinely valuable. "How did it feel to command a fleet action?" he asked as she gathered her materials. Zara considered the question seriously, as she always did with Kane's inquiries. "Terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. The responsibility for so many lives, so many resources, it's overwhelming. But the patterns were clear once I understood the enemy's operational doctrine." Kane nodded approvingly. Her ability to see patterns and strategic relationships was indeed exceptional, but her awareness of the human cost of command decisions was equally important. Too many brilliant strategists forgot that their tactical symbols represented real people with real lives. Their conversation was interrupted by the command center's priority communication system activating. Admiral Reeves's expression became grim as she read the incoming message, and she immediately called for Kane to join her at the primary command station. "We have a situation," she said quietly, ensuring that only Kane could hear. "Long-range sensors have detected an unidentified fleet moving through the outer rim. Configuration and approach vectors don't match any known human, vessels, or friendly alien species." Kane's enhanced senses immediately shifted into combat analysis mode, his genetically modified nervous system beginning to prepare for potential conflict. "How many ships? What's their heading?" "At least 50 vessels, possibly more. They're maintaining formation discipline and moving directly toward the Proxima system. Admiral Reeves paused, her expression troubled. Marcus, Proxima is home to one of our largest civilian populations. If this is a hostile fleet, Kane understood immediately. Proxima Centauri hosted nearly 20 million civilian colonists, mostly families and support personnel for the agricultural and mining operations that supported the outer colonies. It was also lightly defended, with only a small garrison fleet that would be completely overwhelmed by a force of 50 enemy vessels. Response time from the nearest fleet elements? Kane asked, his tactical mind already working through defensive options. 18 hours minimum. The enemy will reach Proxima in 12. Admiral Reeves looked around the command center, ensuring no cadets were close enough to overhear. We need options and we need them fast. What neither of them had noticed was that Zara had remained at her station, ostensibly organizing her materials but actually listening to their conversation, with the enhanced hearing that came from years of straining to catch adult conversations she wasn't supposed to hear. Her tactical mind was already processing the information and beginning to formulate potential solutions. "Admiral," she said quietly, causing both senior officers to turn toward her with surprise. "Cadet Chen," Admiral Reeves said with mild reproach, "this is classified military intelligence." "I understand, Admiral," Zara replied respectfully, "but I may have a suggestion that could help with the Proxima situation." Kane and Admiral Reeves exchanged glances. Kane's protective instincts warred with his recognition of Zara's exceptional capabilities, while the Admiral was clearly torn between military security protocols and desperate need for viable options. "Speak," Kane said finally, his decision made. If Zara had insights that could save 20 million lives, protocol was a secondary concern. Zara activated her station's displays, calling up star charts and fleet disposition reports with the access codes she had been granted for her advanced studies. Her fingers moved quickly across the interface as she outlined her analysis. The enemy fleet is following a direct approach vector, which suggests they're either unfamiliar with our defensive capabilities or confident in their ability to overwhelm local forces, she began. But they're also maintaining tight formation, which indicates coordinated command structures and probably sophisticated communication systems. Kane nodded, following her reasoning. "Go on." "The Proxima system has extensive mining operations, including automated platforms that use controlled antimatter charges for asteroid processing," Zara continued. "If we could coordinate with the Civilian Mining Authority to create a series of controlled detonations along the enemy's approach vector." Admiral Reeves leaned forward with sudden interest. "Create an artificial minefield using civilian infrastructure." "More than that," Zara said, her excitement growing as she developed the concept in real time. "The mining platforms are networked for safety coordination. If we link them to military targeting systems, they could function as a distributed defensive array. The enemy wouldn't expect civilian mining equipment to be weaponized." Kane studied the tactical display that Zara was creating, his enhanced analytical capabilities processing the implications of her suggestion. It was brilliant in its simplicity, using resources that the enemy wouldn't even consider as threats to create a defensive network that could seriously damage or delay their advance. The timing would have to be perfect, he mused, already thinking through the implementation challenges. And the civilian authorities would have to agree to put their people at risk. "The mining platforms are mostly automated during night shifts," Zara pointed out. "Minimal personnel exposure if we time it correctly. And Admiral, the alternative is letting the enemy reach Proxima unopposed." Admiral Reeves was already moving toward the command center's priority communication systems. "I'm contacting Fleet Command and the Proxima Civilian Authority. Cadet Chen, I want you to work with General Kane to develop a detailed tactical plan for this operation." As the Admiral began making calls to coordinate the unprecedented defensive strategy, Kane looked down at Zara with something approaching awe. In less than 10 minutes, she had analyzed a crisis situation and developed a creative solution that might save millions of lives. The 16-year-old girl was demonstrating strategic thinking that rivaled the best military minds in human space. "Are you ready to help coordinate a real military operation?" Kane asked seriously. "This isn't a simulation, Zara. If this works, you'll have directly contributed to saving an entire star system. If it fails, those same people might die, Biko." The youngest recruit in the academy, and the universe's apex predator swore to protect her sixth document. The Academy's primary command center had been transformed into a military operations hub, with real-time data streams connecting directly to Fleet Command and the Proxima system. Zara sat at the central tactical station, her young face illuminated by the glow of multiple holographic displays, showing the approaching enemy fleet and the defensive preparations unfolding across 3-star systems. 8 hours had passed since Admiral Reeves had authorized the implementation of Zara's strategy, and the results were both impressive and terrifying. The civilian mining authorities on Proxima had agreed to weaponize their automated platforms, understanding that cooperation was their only chance of survival. Meanwhile, Fleet Command had scrambled every available warship toward the Proxima system, though they would still arrive hours after the enemy. Kane stood behind Zara's station, watching her coordinate the most complex military operation in recent history. She spoke calmly with mining supervisors, fleet commanders, and civilian authorities, her young voice carrying an authority that seemed impossible given her age. Her tactical displays showed the precise positioning of hundreds of mining platforms, their normal operations suspended in favor of creating a 3-dimensional defensive matrix. Platform Cluster 7 reports readiness, came the voice of Mining Supervisor Chen over the communication link. All automated charges are networked and standing by for remote detonation. Confirmed, Supervisor Chen, Zara responded professionally. Maintain safe distance and prepare for emergency evacuation procedures if the enemy breaks through the initial perimeter. Admiral Reeves approached the station with a grim expression. Long-range reconnaissance confirms our worst fears. The enemy fleet consists of 63 vessels, including at least 12 capital ships with heavy armor and shielding. This isn't a raiding force. It's an invasion fleet. Kane's enhanced senses detected the slight tremor in Zara's hands as she processed this information. 63 ships was a massive force, capable of reducing entire planets to ash if unopposed. The improvised mining platform defense was creative and might inflict significant casualties, but against numbers like that, it would only buy time. Fleet status? Zara asked, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the threat. Admiral Morrison's third fleet is 12 hours out, Admiral Reeves replied. Captain Rodriguez's fast attack squadron might reach the outer system in 9 hours. But that's only 8 ships against 63. Zara studied her tactical displays, her brilliant mind working through probabilities and possibilities with computer-like precision. The numbers were stark and unforgiving. Even if her defensive strategy worked perfectly, it wouldn't be enough to stop an invasion fleet of this size. General Kane, she said quietly, what do you know about the enhanced combat protocols from the Titan project? Kane's expression hardened at the unexpected question. The Titan project's combat protocols were among the most classified secrets in human military history, and very few people even knew they existed. The fact that Zara was aware of them suggested access to intelligence far beyond her supposed security clearance. Why do you ask? He said carefully. Because I've been thinking about asymmetric warfare applications, Zara replied, calling up a new set of displays. The mining platforms are just the beginning. If we can get close enough to the enemy fleet. She trailed off, her fingers dancing across the interface as she developed her concept in real time. Kane watched with growing understanding and horror as she outlined a tactical scenario that was both brilliant and suicidal. You want to use the platforms as cover for a close-range assault, Kane said slowly. Get inside their defensive perimeter while they're dealing with the mining charges. Not me, Zara corrected. You. A single enhanced soldier with the right equipment could cause catastrophic damage to their command and control systems. Disable their coordination and the numerical advantage becomes meaningless. Admiral Reeves leaned forward to study Zara's tactical projection. Cadet Chen, what you're describing is essentially a suicide mission. Even General Kane's enhancements wouldn't allow him to survive that kind of exposure to enemy fire. Kane said nothing, but his enhanced combat systems were already analyzing the scenario and calculating probabilities. Zara's plan was indeed extraordinarily dangerous, but it was also tactically sound. A single infiltrator could potentially cripple an entire fleet if he could reach their command vessels undetected. The approach vector would use the mining platform detonations as concealment. Zara continued, her voice taking on the focused intensity that Kane had learned to recognize when she was working through complex problems. The enemy will be dealing with multiple simultaneous explosions across a wide area. During that chaos, a small stealth craft could penetrate their formation and deploy an enhanced soldier directly onto their flagship. Kane studied the tactical projection with professional interest. The plan was audacious and risky, but it addressed the fundamental problem of the numerical imbalance. If he could disable the enemy's command structure, their invasion fleet would become a collection of individual ships rather than a coordinated force. Equipment requirements? He asked, his decision already made. Marcus, you can't seriously be considering this, Admiral Reeves protested. It's madness. It's warfare, Kane corrected grimly. And it's our best option for protecting 20 million civilians. He turned back to Zara. What do you need from me? Zara's young face was pale but determined. Military assault gear rated for zero-atmosphere combat. Portable EMP devices capable of disabling starship systems and... She hesitated, clearly struggling with something. And, Kane prompted gently, a promise that you'll come back, she said quietly. I know this plan puts you in extreme danger, and I know it's my fault for suggesting it. If something happens to you because of my strategy... Kane reached out and placed his hand on her shoulder, feeling the tension there despite her outward calm. Zara, listen to me. In my career, I've participated in operations that saved thousands of lives. Today, your tactical genius might save millions. The risk is mine to take, and I'm honored to be part of your plan. Before Zara could respond, the command center's priority alert system activated. The main display showed the enemy fleet adjusting course and increasing velocity, their formation tightening as they approached the outer edge of the Proxima system. Contact in 4 hours, Admiral Reeves announced. All stations prepare for combat operations. Kane squeezed Zara's shoulder once more, then headed for the equipment bay to prepare for what might be the most dangerous mission of his enhanced life. As he left the command center, he could hear Zara coordinating with mining supervisors and fleet elements, her young voice carrying the weight of command with remarkable composure. The universe's apex predator was about to hunt the most dangerous prey he had ever faced, guided by the tactical brilliance of humanity's youngest military genius. As he suited up in combat gear designed for the enhanced soldiers of the Titan Project, Kane reflected on how much his life had changed since that first day in the amphitheater, when he had decided to protect a small, vulnerable girl who turned out to be anything but helpless. Now that same girl was coordinating the defense of an entire star system, and Kane was preparing to risk everything to execute her strategy. The relationship between protector and protected had evolved into something far more complex, a partnership between experience and innovation that might represent humanity's best hope. Against the darkness between the stars, as Kane sealed his helmet and began final equipment checks, he could hear Zara's voice over the communication system, calmly giving orders that would determine the fate of millions. The 16-year-old tactical genius had found her moment, and the enhanced soldier sworn to protect her was about to discover whether their combined capabilities were enough to face the ultimate test. The youngest recruit in the academy, and the universe's apex predator swore to protect her seventh document. The stealth insertion craft drifted silently through the expanding cloud of debris and energy discharge created by the mining platform detonations, its hull designed to absorb sensor radiation rather than reflect it. Kane sat in the pilot's seat, his enhanced reflexes managing the delicate navigation required to slip through the enemy formation, undetected, while Zara's voice guided him through the communication link. Target vessel identified. Zara's calm voice reported through his helmet comm. The command signatures suggest it's their flagship, largest vessel, central position in the formation, and the most sophisticated electronic countermeasures. You'll have approximately 6 minutes from hull breach to fleet command disruption before their security forces can respond effectively. Kane adjusted his approach vector, using the chaos of the ongoing battle to mask his movement. The mining platform strategy had worked better than anyone had dared hope. The enemy fleet was scattered and confused, dealing with multiple simultaneous explosions that had already destroyed 4 of their escort vessels and damaged several others. But 60 ships still represented overwhelming force, and the clock was running down fast. Understood, Kane replied quietly. Beginning final approach now. Through the tactical display in his helmet, Kane could see the larger battle unfolding across the Proxima system. Captain Rodriguez's fast attack squadron had arrived ahead of schedule and was harassing the enemy flanks, while Admiral Morrison's larger force was still hours away. The improvised mining platform defense was holding for now, but ammunition was limited, and the enemy was adapting quickly to the unexpected threat. Kane's insertion craft touched down on the enemy flagship's hull with barely a whisper, magnetic clamps securing it to the alien metal, while his enhanced senses analyzed the structure and layout. The vessel was massive, easily 3 times larger than the biggest human dreadnought, its hull covered in unfamiliar weapons and sensor arrays that spoke of advanced military technology. Hull breach in 30 seconds, Kane reported, activating the cutting tools that would create his entry point. Zara, are you tracking my progress? Every step, came her immediate reply. Internal layout analysis suggests their command center will be approximately 200 meters forward of your position, probably protected by multiple security checkpoints. Remember, your primary objective is to disrupt their coordination, not to engage in extended combat. Kane smiled grimly as the cutting tools completed their work, and he prepared to enter the alien ship. Zara's tactical mind was working even now, providing guidance and support despite the desperate situation unfolding around them. Her voice was steady and professional, but he could hear the underlying tension that came from watching someone she cared about walk into mortal danger. The interior of the enemy vessel was unlike anything in human ship design, with corridors that seemed to flow organically rather than following geometric patterns. Kane's enhanced senses adapted quickly to the alien environment, cataloging threats and mapping routes with superhuman efficiency. His combat systems were fully active now, flooding his bloodstream with stimulants and sharpening his reflexes. To their absolute peak, the first security checkpoint came sooner than expected. 2 alien guards in powered armor that turned toward him with weapons already charging. Kane moved with the lethal grace of humanity's apex predator, his enhanced speed allowing him to close the distance before they could bring their weapons to bear. The combat was brief and brutal, ending with both guards disabled and Kane continuing deeper into the ship. Contact with enemy security forces, he reported tersely, continuing toward primary objective. Understood, Zara replied. Fleet analysis shows they're beginning to restore coordination. You need to reach their command center within the next 4 minutes. Kane increased his pace, navigating the alien corridors with enhanced senses that picked up details a normal human would miss. The ship was clearly designed for a species larger and stronger than baseline humans, but Kane's modifications allowed him to move through their environment with relative ease. The second checkpoint presented a more serious challenge. A squad of 6 guards positioned around a security barrier that blocked access to the forward sections of the ship. Kane's tactical analysis identified multiple approach vectors, but all of them required exposing himself to concentrated fire from multiple directions. Instead of a direct assault, Kane deployed one of his portable EMP devices, sending it rolling down the corridor ahead of him. The electromagnetic pulse disabled the alien's powered armor and created enough confusion for him to eliminate the entire squad with clinical precision. His enhanced combat training had prepared him for exactly this kind of situation, and the aliens found themselves facing a predator unlike anything in their tactical doctrine. 3 minutes to command center, Zara's voice urged in his ear. Enemy fleet is beginning to regroup. Whatever you're going to do, it needs to happen now. Kane reached the final barrier protecting the command center, a massive armored door that would normally require heavy explosives to breach. Instead, he attached his remaining EMP devices directly to the door's control systems, overloading them and causing the barrier to iris open with a grinding mechanical sound. The alien command center beyond was a testament to advanced technology, filled with holographic displays and control interfaces that managed the coordination of the entire invasion fleet. A dozen alien officers turned toward Kane's entrance with expressions of shock and alarm, reaching for weapons that would never clear their holsters in time. Kane moved through the command center like a force of nature, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to disable alien officers and destroy critical control systems faster than any defense could be mounted. His final EMP device went directly into the primary command console, sending cascading failures throughout the ship's computer network. Primary objective complete, Kane reported as alarms began wailing throughout the alien vessel. Fleet command coordination is down. Through his helmet's tactical display, Kane could see the immediate effects of his sabotage. The enemy fleet was losing formation cohesion, individual ships beginning to operate independently rather than as a coordinated force. Captain Rodriguez's squadron was already taking advantage of the confusion, picking off isolated vessels that could no longer coordinate their defenses. Confirmed. Zara's voice carried obvious relief. Fleet coordination is completely disrupted. Admiral Morrison's force will arrive in 2 hours to finish the cleanup. Marcus, you did it. The invasion has been stopped. Kane began fighting his way back toward his insertion point, knowing that alien security forces would be converging on his location. But his primary mission was complete, and the threat to Proxima's civilian population had been neutralized. As he moved through the alien corridors, he could hear Zara coordinating with fleet elements and civilian authorities. Her tactical genius now focused on managing the aftermath of their successful defense. The extraction was as dangerous as the infiltration had been, with Kane fighting through multiple security teams before reaching his stealth craft. As he sealed the airlock and began his return journey to the academy, he could see the enemy fleet scattering in all directions, their invasion plans completely shattered by the loss of central coordination. Stealth craft returning to base, Kane reported as he cleared the enemy formation. Mission accomplished. Welcome home, Zara's voice replied warmly. Admiral Reeves wants a full debriefing as soon as you dock, but first, thank you for trusting my plan, for risking everything to save those people. Kane piloted his craft through the debris field that had once been a coordinated enemy fleet, thinking about the remarkable young woman whose tactical brilliance had made this victory possible. When he had first sworn to protect her, he had seen a vulnerable child who needed a guardian. Now he understood that Zara Chen was destined to be one of humanity's greatest military leaders, and he had been privileged to witness the moment when she truly came into her own. Thank you, Zara, he replied quietly, for showing me what true strategic genius looks like, for trusting me with your plan, and for reminding me why some things are worth fighting for. As the academy came into view ahead of them, Kane reflected on how much had changed since that first day in the amphitheater. The universe's apex predator had sworn to protect a young recruit, and in return, that recruit had shown him new ways to use his lethal capabilities in service of something greater than warfare itself. The youngest recruit in the academy had just coordinated her first major military victory, and Kane knew it would be far from her last. Together they represented the future of human military doctrine, experience and innovation combined in a partnership that could face any threat the galaxy might offer. The invasion of Proxima had been stopped, 20 million lives had been saved, and Zara Chen had proven that age was no barrier to tactical brilliance when combined with the courage to act on conviction. As Kane brought his craft in for landing, he smiled at the thought that this was only the beginning of their story together.